And now it's Bob Brown here, and I am with David Gerald. Jim Wright is currently somewhere in Death Valley trying to, I don't know if Death Valley, he says he's in the southwest and it's hot, but these days it's hot everywhere. There's global warming.
I can definitely confirm that it is hot. I don't even want to go out of the house if I don't have to. So it is. We have had 100-degree weather or more, and I have errands to run. It's like, and so I have to deal with heat and traffic. So it's like coming home. Thank God the air conditioning is working. Otherwise, I would be in the pool all day. It's like first world problems: air conditioning and the swimming pool. And the pool is warm, by the way. It's like it is no longer cool. It's like that's how hot it is here. So anyway.
Well, I hear it's like 100 degrees in the water in the ocean off Florida.
Well, they're closer to the equator, and it's like and they, and they have the Gulf Stream coming up there. So it's like Florida is not my favorite place in the world.
Yeah, I've listened to Jim talk enough about it to realize I don't think it's his either.
I did visit Key West many years ago and had a great time. And of course, Hemingway lived in Key West, and the Hemingway house is there. There's a lot of cats there. And so I walked into the local bar and I said, I'll have what Hemingway had. And they served me something pink and sweet. I said, are you kidding me? Hemingway was drinking this? So it was okay, though.
Hey, I saw a joke online you'd appreciate. 3 QAnon members walked into a bar. And what? You think that was just a coincidence? Okay. So, David, are you a member of SAG?
Yes, I am. I'm a member of SAG-AFTRA, but I'm inactive because I wasn't pursuing the acting career. I got the card because I wanted to prove to some people who say, "Hey, you can't act," right? Here's my card. Okay. Anyway, but and I could reactivate anytime. Now it would be like several $1,000s, and unless somebody offered me the starring role in the next Star Wars movie, I don't know. Well, I would be a great Jedi. I would use the Force.
So talk to me then, if you could. I am like many of us. I don't really truly understand all that is at stake with this strike. I just have this sub vibration in my gut that says that if the writers and the actors lose this, someday all we're going to be watching is AI movies that were coming out of a big blue computer.
Well, in terms of creativity, right now AI is a good machine for mediocrity because it looks at the past. It doesn't innovate. Now, it can put together some unusual combinations that will look like innovation, but AI doesn't look to the future. It always builds it can look at patterns, and there are a number of things AI can do, like write computer code and things like that. But in terms of writing stories or whatever, it's a mediocrity processor right now. And so let me talk about the strike. Now, this is the 6th time the Writers Guild has been on strike that I have been a member. And these strikes are expensive. 3 times I've had deals evaporate because we went on strike. And but let me give you some numbers here first. Bob Iger said that it's unrealistic for actors and writers to go on strike. Bob Iger earns more than $75,000 a day, including Sundays. By the time today is over, he'll be $75,000 richer. The average screenwriter makes $69,000 a year. Hang on a second. You are not part of this conference. All right. So the average screenwriter makes less in a year than Bob Iger makes in a day. The average member of SAG-AFTRA makes $40,000 a year. So one of the, so and Bob Iger thinks it's unrealistic for us to ask for a living wage. Bob Iger is unrealistic. He works for a mouse, and he's calling us unrealistic. The thing is the Charlie, knock it off, or it's back to the medical research lab. All right, so
I think he believed you.
I hope so. All right. Anyway, he's a rescue. Almost all of my dogs have been rescues. I pointed this out to someone. He says, "And your son is adopted too?" Which I think was very funny. I guess there's part of me that is a rescuer. Anyway, the thing is, the AMPTP is run by corporations. Like Coca-Cola owns Viacom. I forget. There's a whole list of which big corporations own the studios. And what they want are tentpole pictures and franchises. They're interested only in the profit that these companies can make. If you've seen, there's a wonderful miniseries about the making of The Godfather. And Charles Bluhdorn, who was then his company had owned Paramount, and I forget what company he was in charge of. And he was only interested in how much money Paramount could make. He wasn't interested in the movies that Paramount could make. The Godfather got made almost by accident because Bluhdorn was looking to sell Paramount. The big corporations they don't make movies, they make money. Now, the glory days of Hollywood, when you had producers like Walt Disney and Harry Cohn and Irving Thalberg and Sam Goldwyn and Louis G. Mayer and and Jack Warner, these guys loved movies. And they said, let's make a movie. I want to see this movie, so let's make this movie. And you say, this is a great vehicle for this star. I want to see this star as Queen Elizabeth. I want to see Humphrey Bogart as who was it? Sam Spade. No, Archer got killed. I want to see Humphrey Bogart in The Maltese Falcon. And they would make these movies because they loved movie making. You know, there are movies that could not be made today under the current system. You would not get Don Siegel directing Invasion of the Body Snatchers. You wouldn't get George Pell doing War of the World. You wouldn't get Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf with Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. You wouldn't get The Misfits with Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe. You wouldn't get these movies. And God forbid, you would not get Lawrence of Arabia or Bridge Over the River Kwai because there's no sequel. They're not good franchises. We don't know there'll be a tentpole. But, you know, back in the 60s, Dr. Zhivago was a David Lean picture and a brilliant, beautiful movie. And it did not get strong reviews. And it did not do well at the box office. And MGM, instead of pulling it or losing interest, they pushed it at the box office and pushed it. And they had faith in it. And the picture caught fire and was the best picture of the year and made a lot of money because MGM had faith in the movie itself. The same thing with a bunch of other movies that had slow starts. MGM was afraid 2001 would be a disaster. It stayed in the Warner's Theater on Hollywood Boulevard for 2 years. Nobody does that. Daryl Zanuck had faith in a little $9 million sci-fi picture called Star Wars. Stayed in the Chinese theater for 2 years, sold out almost every performance. That's what the movie industry used to be, where people loved making movies. Now we have corporations who own the studios, and they're not interested in making great movies. Those are coming from independents or people who have enough clout to say, this is the movie I'm going to make next, like Steven Spielberg. But for the great majority of people, Hollywood is a factory town. And I want to talk about the factory. It's not just it's not just the actors and the writers and the directors. Without the writers, though, I want to make this point at the very beginning. Without the writers, all you have is a bunch of naked people standing around in a large, dark, empty room with nothing to say, because it all starts with the writers. And Irving Thalberg, one of the great producers, said the writers are the most powerful people in Hollywood. We must never let them find that out. But after the writers, you have the directors and the producers. You have the costumers, hair and makeup. Well, costumers have to buy cloth. They have to pay people to sew. And if you have an epic picture like Dr. Zhivago, you've got a lot of costumes. So there's a lot of work for a lot of seamstresses all over Hollywood. Bill Tice, who was the costume designer for Star Trek, had a almost secret installation a couple blocks off of the Paramount lot where the costumes were produced because he couldn't do it all himself. Props, same thing with props. It's not just your prop master goes off and cobbles something together. There are companies that build props for various shows, and with a show like Star Trek or a movie like Star Trek, there are a lot of special props. Sets, you need carpenters and painters. Well, you have to buy wood, you have to buy paint, you have to hire people to come in. You need an art director to design that stuff. And there's a lot of work. Electricians, you've got to hang lights. You got to have grips to move cables and move things. What am I leaving out? Editors, you have to edit film. You have sound. You have to have sound specialists, people who can do that. And I'm probably plants, greenery, and all of this requires ancillary industries to support whatever you want to put in front of the camera. Somebody's got to make it happen. You have to have cars. You have to go to a car rental, a specialty that just rent cars for movies of all kinds. So they have to maintain their inventory. If you're going to do a movie that takes place in 1920, you need a 1920 car. All of this stuff requires support industries all over Hollywood, whatever. You drive through Hollywood, classic Hollywood, and I remember this from the 60s. It was not this glamorous Disneyland. It was factory, assembly line. And when it was filmed, you had film processing, and Technicolor had a huge building. You had all kinds of film labs. And you can still see this all over Los Angeles and Hollywood and Burbank. There are a lot of little buildings that are producing material, and there's assembly line to put stuff in front of the camera. Now, AI makes it possible that you don't have to build as much. So with The Mandalorian and a couple of the Star Wars things, there's a thing called Unreal Engine, which is a CGI process. They have the humongous screen. I think it's a LED. And they have a humongous screen, and they have somebody behind the background, whether it's a planet or an installation or whatever. And the actors can stand in front of that screen, and you can shoot it, and it looks like they are on Tatooine or whatever planet or wherever you need them to be. And not only that, it is wired up to the camera in such a way that if the camera moves, the background shifts accordingly. So it looks like, so you can do these great epic shots without ever having to leave the soundstage. That is great from the producer and the director's point of view, from the actor's point of view, but it means the whole location services industry is impacted. Oh, I forgot to mention craft services. The single most important part of morale is having good food, good lunch. Without anything in production, the craft services people are hurting. So this strike is not just hurting the writers and the actors, it's hurting the entire economy of Los Angeles. It's hurting the entire economy of the film and television industry. It's hurting all the people who need to go to work in order to pay their mortgages. And I want to make this point. The AMPTP uses strikes as a house cleaning measure. We're about to pass a moment where all of the first look deals expire. So that means a lot of money that the AMPTP doesn't have to spend. So this, particularly the writer strikes always go on for at least 3 months because the AMPTP, Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, uses the strike to clean house. Well, we're on strike, so we're going to let you go. So they clean out all of the projects that weren't going to go anywhere. They clean out all of the staff that were attached to those projects. And so for 3 months, their bottom line looks great. They don't have to come to the negotiating table. And if they've stocked up on scripts and stuff, they're good for 3 or 4 months. And they saw this strike coming 2 years ago. So this strike is hurting the entire economy of Los Angeles, the entire economy of California, and ultimately the economy of the United States. One of my buddies has pointed out that every time there's a writer's strike, there's a recession 8 months later because of all of the other industries and support systems in place that don't get to go to work. With the actors on strike, it's even more deadly because production is simply stopped. Didn't matter that the directors made a deal last month. Production is dead. Now the AMPTP, they think they have to break the guilt, and some it's uncredited. The guy said it, but we don't know who said it. He said this strike has to go on until writers start losing their homes. It's cruel but a necessary evil. Because essentially the AMPT's position is to go on for so long that the writers will accept any deal with the AMP. Well, what the AMPTP doesn't realize is most people working in the industry don't make a lot of money. Most of us have second sources of income, or second and third. Most of us have second jobs. We love, when the phone rings and come on in and sell us a script. It doesn't happen anymore because for the past 20 years, the AMPTP has been reorganizing the industry to pay less and less for scripts. So the writer's room was one way that they didn't have to deal with freelancers anymore. But then they managed to jigger the rules for writers' rooms that the writers would work on a show before it would be greenlit, and then they'd be let go. So they wouldn't make, it used to be, I don't know what the price of a script is now, $30,000 for an hour script, $35,000. If you only sell one script a year, that's good for your Writers Guild dues, but you can't live on that because after your agent and taxes and withholding, your $35,000 script is worth $15,000, $20,000. You got to sell 3 scripts a year just to survive. Well, most writers learn to write short stories, novels, teach, have a second job. So if the AMPTP thinks they're going to hurt us by depriving us of income, well, yeah, we'll take an income hit, but we're not going to starve to death. And there are, if I won the lotto tonight or tomorrow, you better believe that the first thing I do would be contribute to the entertainment funds to guarantee no writer or actor would lose their home because of this damn strike. The AMPTP makes something like, God, I forget, what is it, 7, 8, some ungodly number of billions every year with their tent poles and their franchises and their streaming and the this and the that, and even the CD and DVD and Blu-ray and 4K sales bring in a hefty chunk of money. What the writers and the actors want amounts to less than 0.1%. Something like the writers want something like $70 million increase total, and I'm not sure what the actors want. But the key point is that the AMPTP wants to restructure the industry so that writers and actors are costs, not partners, and that's the point I want to make. Movie making is a team effort. And I know this. I've written, I've directed, I've produced, I have had all of these roles, and it is a team effort. Where you have partnership, you are having a lot of fun and you do great work.
So Dave,
where you
go ahead.
Yeah, where you get sorry, I was catching my breath. I'm hearing some weird noise. I don't know if it's me or you or whatever, some weird chirping in the background.
God, I'm sitting here, I'm so enamored of what you're saying. I didn't turn on the comment.
Okay.
They will.
All right.
You go ahead, and I'm going to go get the comments running.
Okay. Well, comments are scrolling up. So anyway, movies are made by teams, not committees. They are not an authoritarian structure. They're a partnership. And I'll give you an example of the kind of partnership. I love sharing this story. It was one of my first days visiting the Star Trek set, and they were shooting the Doomsday Machine. And they were doing, Kirk was on the alternate bridge, and he's watching as the other starship is destroyed by the giant Yam. And William Wyndham's character, Captain Whatever, is killed. And it's a very intense scene. And they were lighting it and getting ready. Mark Daniels was the director. Mark Daniels directed all the I Love Lucy's. Jerry Finnerman was the director of photography. And they were two of the most talented men in Hollywood because they were producing excellence 6 days a week. And it was amazing. And so they're setting up the shot, and Bill Shatner says, "What if you hung a flag over the light so when I lower my head, my face goes into shadow? When he dies, I lower my head, my face goes into shadow." Mark Daniels said, "It seems like a good idea at the time." And Jerry Finnerman was already rigging the flag. And it was a moment of perfect teamwork and partnership to get the right shot for what. And it was like, you watch the episode and it's a very brief shot, but that kind of care went into every single shot of every single episode of Star Trek. Mark Daniels and Joe Pevney were remarkable directors, and they delivered the goods every single day. So I cannot stress this enough. Great movies, great television comes from a partnership. I directed a fan film for James Cawley up at Trek Ticonderoga, and it was called Blood and Fire, and you can find it on YouTube. And they were a little tense when I came in because the previous director had been very authoritarian and was not a fun experience, and they were afraid this would be the same kind of shoot. And I came in and said, "Are we going to have some fun or what?" And we did have a couple moments where I said, "Listen, people, we have to be here at 8 in the morning, ready to go if we want to go home and have a good night's sleep." I called them all together, and everybody said, "Oh, is that the rule? Okay." And everybody was having a great amount of fun. And along the way, while we were setting up a shot, we'd play movie trivia. Why is it called MOS, Without Sound? Because there was a German director in silent films, early talkies, shoot at MOS. What is that? Without sound. So we'd play movie trivia, and people started having fun. And as a result, I could ask for things that were very difficult, and people were willing to do it because they knew we were in partnership. Great directors do that. Bad directors or bad actors don't get invited back. One of the worst actors in Hollywood was a fellow named Lawrence Tierney. It played a lot of villains and heavies, and he was brought on to Seinfeld to play somebody's dad, and he was such a horror to work with. They wrote the character out, and he was never invited back. But if he had been a contribution, he'd have been a regular. Great television, great movies are a partnership where everybody feels that their contribution is loved and accepted. The original Star Trek had that. Star Trek The Next Generation did not, which is one of the reasons I left. Anyway, coming back to the strike, the AMPTP thinks that the movie industry is like any other manufacturing industry, and that you have various costs. So you have the cost of labor over here, and you have the cost of the machines, and the cost of the building, the cost of insurance, and you put so much raw material in, and you get product out. And so their assumption, and the corporations that own the AMPTP, their assumption is movies are a product that we can turn out. And they're always amazed when a movie flops at the box office. So why did this movie flop? It was a perfectly good movie. It was another sequel to a franchise that had earned billions and billions of dollars. Why did this one? The AMPTP, David Zaslav, head of Warner's, is worth $500 million. He's the most hated man in Hollywood. Now, those of us who write and act, our big concern right now is that the AMPTP wants to introduce artificial intelligence as a production means, which means they want to be able to scan an extra, and they'll pay you $100 to scan you, but then they will own that scan in perpetuity and use it wherever they want, whenever they want. We have the same thing with ChatGPT, is that it prowls through the internet looking at everybody's published work and uses that as the basis. Now, I believe, and this is me, I'm not speaking for any guild, I believe that if they use your work or your likeness, you should get a royalty or a residual. So, you want to scan me and use my likeness? Okay. And every time you do, I want a residual. That at least gives me some hope of some income. By the way, I have here, it's on that table behind me, I have here my latest residual check, $1.62. I can hardly wait to run to the bank and spend it on paying the tax on my McDonald's bill. It's insane. Paramount and CBS have made $1 billion on The Trouble with Tribbles. I do not get a residual on Tribbles anymore. I do get at the end of the year a check from CBS, which is maybe about $200-300 for merchandising of Tribbles. And somebody came up to me at Comic-Con where I was selling scripts, and I was selling the Trouble with Tribbles script, which sells very nicely. I've made more money selling copies of that script to fans than I will ever make in residuals off the show, even though the studios and the people who own the studios are making billions off of Star Trek and those 79 episodes. Now, those 79 episodes are not the big money making machine anymore, because they have the movies, they have Next Gen, they have Deep Space Nine, they have Strange New Worlds, they have Below Decks. So there's a lot of competition. But for the longest time, like 50 years, we should have been getting residuals. And there were more than a few times when Leonard Nimoy refused to sign a contract to come back and be in the next movie until the other actors were properly compensated too. So this strike is about, it's not just about we want a living wage, which we do, and we want better residuals, which we do. It's also about protecting ourselves from the uses of artificial intelligence, which right now it's not much, it's not very intelligent, but these are, the studios want to get to the point where they go to a computer and say, give me Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe starring in a remake of African Queen. And the computers will generate the movie, and they won't have to pay any actor or any writer. And that's the goal, is to remove actors and writers from the process. Now, there actually, you can generate a pretty realistic simulation of an actor with AI, and it's only going to get better. We've already seen the incredible backgrounds that the Unreal Engine produces for The Mandalorian and other Star Wars films. So it's inevitable that the tech is only going to get better. Along the way, we want to protect the human element. And this is my belief right now. I don't believe that any AI has a human soul. And therefore, you are not going to get the kind of writing from an AI that you would get from a real human being. You're not going to get an author, you're not going to get lines like an offer you can't refuse. You're not going to get lines like nobody's perfect, the punchline of Some Like It Hot. You're not going to get films that go beyond, you're not going to get imagination. You're going to get stuff recycled. Now, I've seen a lot of AI generated art, and some of it is fascinating, but there's a mediocrity to it that doesn't have the inspiration of one of my favorite pieces of art is Guernica by Pablo Picasso, which was written in reaction to the bombing of a small town in Spain, or Crows Over Wheatfield by Van Gogh. You don't get that kind of artwork from AI. You don't get the kind of artwork that causes you to stop and stare, like the Nighthawks by Hopper. Hopper's paintings, you stop and stare and wonder what's going on. You don't get that from AI. You can get interesting compositions because AI is learning from studying, the patterns, but the human element is not present in what AI is capable of. Now, who knows where it'll be 20, 25 years from now? Maybe 50 years from now, if I were still alive, I'd sit down and say, do me another book in the War Against the Tor series. And maybe it would be able to evoke some sense of humanity. But right now, the things I've played with ChatGPT is like, oh my God, this is so mediocre. It's like, this is worse than what my students used to do at Pepperdine University. At least they were struggling to do something human and humane. So this strike is about keeping the human element in the production that this industry is about. This industry, I said something yesterday that has resonated. It's like there's a partnership between writers and readers, and the book isn't finished until someone reads it. And the same is true with movies and television. The product isn't finished until someone views it. And what they come to movies and television for is a human experience. The stuff that is churned out, another slice off the old sausage, that's boring. It's the reason I stopped watching the Flintstones. It was boring. But it's not but it's the reason I keep going back to Rick and Morty and Futurama, is because there's this human, authentic feeling that real people are at work there. And we can't lose that. If we lose that, then we don't have entertainment anymore. We just have distraction. Entertainment is not just something you sit down and watch. It's the art is the way we codify our culture. It is the way we demonstrate our culture. It is the way we expand our culture. The art that we have created defines who we are. The Godfather is a unique part of American culture. So is Star Wars and Star Trek. So is Citizen Kane. So is the 1953 film War of the Worlds or 1956 Invasion of the Body Snatchers. These are part of our universal consciousness. And entertainment is about defining the human experience. So, and this goes all the way back to ancient Greece with the Greek theater, Aristophanes, and these wonderful plays that we used to study in theater arts. These wonderful plays were about the human experience, Oedipus and Electra. And then you come to, and Lysistrata. Oh, thank God for Lysistrata, one of my favorites. And then you come forward to Shakespeare. And again, and Shakespeare is this monument. No writer will ever surpass Shakespeare, I think. But look at what Shakespeare gave us: Hamlet and Macbeth and A Midsummer Night's Dream and so on, and Twelfth Night and Romeo and Juliet and all of these great, remarkable plays, and the Scottish play. All of these great, remarkable plays are not about the time or the place. They're about the human experience. We cannot take that out of art, or we become a very mechanized, mechanical culture, worse than anything that was postulated by Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, worse than anything postulated by Orwell in 1984. Both of those books, they're not two opposites on a spectrum. They are two sides of the same coin, where human uniqueness is abandoned or stopped. We can't afford that. And that's ultimately what this strike is about, is keeping the human element in production of motion pictures and television. The AMPTP, they're interested in money, and what is most bizarre about this is that if they're interested in money, they'd have negotiated a fair contract and avoided the strike, because the damage have already done to the Los Angeles economy, the state economy, and ultimately the national economy is horrendous. That is money that is lost. That is money that will never be recovered. Whatever gains either side wins in this strike, we will never recover the money that has been lost in the 3 months of the writer's strike. What is it, 6 weeks already of the actor's strike, or 4 weeks? And the strike is that the AMPTP is making impossible demands, not because there are things I know that they put in that their contract demand specifically that they're going to give that up, and then the writers and the actors can call it a victory. But there are other things in there that they are fighting to keep that will permanently damage the guilds and will permanently damage the labor movement in this country. The guilds are angrier than I have ever seen them in the past 50 years. And every so often when a member of the AMPTP says something, they only make the writers and the actors angrier because they are so out of touch with the working conditions on the sound stages. They are so out of touch. If they were truly interested in profit making, it's, oh yes, all you want is 1/10 of 1% and another $70 million in raises here, and a guarantee that humans will, and protection to your job so you can keep working. Well, yeah, look at how much money you've made for us. Let's keep you working. So whoever is the idea here is not simply the contract; it's union busting. They want to hurt the union so badly. Well, the Writers Guild has a $21 million strike fund. And I don't know what the Actors Guild has, but Dwayne Johnson just donated 7 figures. We don't know how much, 7 figures to the actors, the SAG-AFTRA strike fund. So somebody on the Laura Mendez on the chat, voice actors are notoriously underpaid as well. Can you imagine a modern game without voice acting? Yes, it is not. It is not just through the voices and it's everything. Let me give you an example, because there's a lot of CGI where the actor wears the suit with the little ping pong balls all over it, so that I'm hearing the chirping again, Bob. The actor wears the suit with the ping pong balls so that the camera can record that, and then they use that as the points for the character, whether it's Gollum or the apes in Planet of the Apes or so on. Those actors have to be paid as well. Andy Serkis should have gotten an Oscar nomination for Gollum, but Gollum was considered a CGI creation, not an acting job. But Andy Serkis is an incredible actor. So I grew up in this industry, and I have such admiration. I've met so many great people. I've met Robert Wise and Mark Daniels and Randall Kleiser and so on. And I've met Hua Chang and Gene Warren Jr., who did the effects for Land of the Lost. And I've met so many incredible actors. And I will tell you, my admiration for Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy is never been surpassed. My admiration for Nichelle Nichols, God, I miss that woman. She was incredible. It takes a certain amount of courage to get up in front of a camera, let alone an audience. Not every actor is a millionaire. Not every writer is as glamorous as you see in movies like The Wonder Boys. A lot of us are just, hard working stiffs worrying about next month's mortgage. And it's like, I sold a story to Analog. Yay! I'm more thrilled by selling the story to Analog than when the check came in. But that check was important too. Used to be a science fiction writer could make a fairly good living before the age of computers. You did a short story for 2 weeks. You worked on it. You did a novel every 3 months, every 4 or 5, 6 months. 2 novels and a bunch of short stories a year, and you could afford your mortgage. Robert Silverberg, who was could turn out a novel every 6 weeks, made a lot of money, and the publishers, you had newsstands and you had book racks in the supermarkets and everywhere, and a lot of bookstores. You could make a fairly healthy living, and that once you had like 9 or 10 books in print, your backlist made enough royalties that you were actually doing very well. You could travel to a convention and pretend to be important. But I will tell you, the computer changed to that, the personal computer, because they started looking. Oh, we printed 60,000 copies, but we only sold 40, so let's only print 40,000 copies next time. And all of a sudden, the 20,000 copies that were in the warehouse that were going out for repeat orders, those were gone. And not only that, the law changed that the publishers had to pay tax on what was in the warehouse. So there's another incentive for not having a mid list. We don't have a mid list anymore. We have Amazon. And because anybody can put a book on Amazon, there's no editors, no proofreaders, nobody else in that process. You have no idea if you're getting something by Heinlein or Joe Schultz. It's like, and it's like, oh, look at all the 5-star reviews from friends of Joe Schultz. I'm sorry if there's somebody out there named Joe Schultz. I just made up the names. But the writing is a lot harder, and there's a lot more people writing these days. So back when I started, there were only 90 people writing science fiction in America. And now there's 9,000 at least, or 90,000. God knows. I mean, it's like the membership in the SFWA is approaching astronomical numbers. It's hard to believe all those people are writing science fiction, making a living at it. The original membership of the SFWA was writers who were making a living. Now it's a lot of people who, they sell a couple stories. They're not making a living, but they get the information and the benefits of the organization. They get the warnings of who to avoid. They get they get notices of who's buying. And so those are useful. That's useful for them, but it's no longer an organization that is dominated by professional writers. It is an organization that is got a whole dynamic of up here. You have John Scalzi, and way down at the bottom, you have the person who has told only 2 or 3 stories, and then goes back to work at the other job. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not condemning anybody. I'm not judging. This is not a look who's important and look who isn't. No, it's everybody writes to their own speed. But all of the writers, whether you're up here or just still a beginner or whatever, all of the writers deserve the same protections. And the same is true of WGAW. There are people who want to get into, they want to sell their first script or their first movie or get into the writer's room in a television show. And the opportunities aren't there anymore. Back in 1967, when the shows depended on freelancers, I could sell a script to Star Trek. I could get into the office of Bonanza. I can't do that anymore. It's all writers' rooms. There's no freelancers. The only freelance scripts are the ones that you have to be a friend of the producer, because he's not going to take a chance on somebody he doesn't know. So this strike is about rearranging the industry to protect the workers, from changes in the industry. Somebody posted an article recently, the other day, and I haven't had a chance to really think about it, that predicted that AI is going to destroy 85 million jobs. I don't know if that's 85 million jobs in America or just 85 million jobs globally, probably 85 million jobs globally, because of the things that AI can do that will replace human work. But we're already seeing this. If you call customer service for any company, you're talking to a menu of responses, not quite artificial intelligence, but tell me what you want. Well, press 1 for this, press 2 for that, or you can even speak it, and it'll say, I didn't understand that. And well, of course you didn't understand, not what the language I used, but before you ever talk to a human being, you have gone through a menu of canned responses, and that's what AI is going to do. It's going to. I'll give you another example. My local supermarket has replaced. They only have one checkout line and 6 or 8 self-service. Lowe's, you go in and they have the self checkout. And the funny thing is CVS also has this self checkout. That's a pharmacy, I think. Um, and they have to have somebody there to show you how the self checkout works because it is such a complicated system. I prefer, if I've got more than 4 items, I'm going through the checkout line and I'm going to have a human interaction. But technology, there's this thing where companies are thinking, if we can do it with a machine, we don't have to hire as many human beings. And what happens is they have to hire more human beings to show the customers how to use the machines. But what we're losing is the human interaction. Now, I can't say I loved the human interaction every time I went to the store, but at least there was a human being who, oh, let me get, one time I went to Vaughn's and there's this one checker there who I just absolutely love. She says, let me get you this instead. It'll be cheaper. You're not going to get a machine doing that. And if the machine makes a mistake, what are you going to do? And I've had machines make mistakes on me. So, listen, I've gone on for pretty much an hour. You got questions?
Well, actually, David, I did have a concept that I was kind of curious about. We talk a lot about the actors and the writers, and you've mentioned the hairdressers, the hair, What happens when we get the informed consent agreements all in place that the actors will be compensated if their image is altered, the writers will be compensated if their dialogue is altered? That covers writers and actors. But what about the people who don't get their check now, don't get that day's work when a whole new hairstyle is added? Are we going to be forced to write these people's off basically as if they were the buggy whip manufacturers of the modern era? I mean, what's
I don't know. I'm probably wrong about half of what I've said. The important thing, the only thing I know I'm right about is we cannot take the human element out. And the more we take the human element out, the more we destroy the possibilities of art. Now, I know a lot of artists are looking to see how do we make AI work for us as a tool. And I'm God bless them. They're actually, let me do it this way. There's a short story in Astounding back in the 50s where the aliens want to destroy the Earth economy. So they deliver 2 devices. You put something on one tray and it duplicates it on the other tray. And the reason they deliver 2 is so you can put one on the tray and produce another duplicating device. And pretty soon, these duplicating devices are being duplicated all over the world, and they are absolutely going to destroy an economy of scarcity. What happens is human beings are smart enough and clever enough and resourceful enough. This is the kind of story Astounding Love, that we went from an economy of scarcity to an economy of abundance in hours. It was like, oh, you really like this great steak? Great. We'll duplicate this great steak so everybody can have a great steak, and so on. And so there is a possibility that I'm not an enemy of artificial intelligence. There is a possibility that we will find ways to use it as a valuable tool. I've had ChatGPT write some remarkable Pascal code, and I'm sure it can write code in other languages too. I'm just very familiar with Turbo Pascal from way back when. So in terms of writing code, it saves a lot of time. There are other things that artificial intelligence can do that human beings can use it for. It's a great tool, but at the same time, tools can be weapons. Tools can be misused. We discovered that people were using computer programs instead of their own judgment and making terrible decisions because as I mentioned with when Betty Ballantine was editing Ballantine books. She was thinking in terms of Ballantine Books as a publisher, what serves us as a context for publishing. Once the computer comes in and the bean counters come in and they start looking at, well, this book didn't make enough money, so why are we hiring this writer? Well, Betty said to me one time, I'm not going to make any money on your collection, but I'm going to buy it so you'll be loyal and I'll make money on your next bestseller. And she made a lot of money on my next two bestsellers. So Betty had a relationship with writers that she wanted to keep the writers happy, working, and able to pay their mortgages. When Bob Silverberg's house burned down, she sent him a check for $2,000 and said, here's an advance on your next book. There's a lot of money in 1960 something. So what we're losing is the human element. The computer says this is not going to work. Well, where there's a human element and a humane element, and that larger sense of we're all partners in this, you get a different context. The computer says the numbers don't add up. The human says we are partners. And I think that's a lot of what's at the basis of this strike is we are partners in this industry. We are not labor. We are not cost. We are partners. And we want to be treated like partners. That's it. I don't know if that answers your question. I don't.
Well, you know what, David? Any questions that we have are going to be answered by the outcome of this. And the outcome is definitely unknown right now. I posted a link earlier that is it's called What We Want. It's the SAG answer. It basically boils down a list of everything that all the issues on the table, what the strikers would like to see accomplished, and then what the proposal from the folks is. And so there's way more than any man, even one as talented as you, can cover in an hour. So answer me this then. What projects have you got going on? How's the move to Vermont going?
Well, I'll tell you, I have two books that we're going to be self-publishing sometime after the strike ends. One is called 7 Stories That Should Be Movies. The ebook is already available. I haven't put it on Amazon, but it is available for people who support my GoFundMe. But the other one is 3 scripts I've written that I believe would make good movies, and that one will be published. It'll be called Just Shoot Me. And I just need to do some editing on the 3rd script. I'm doing personally, I'm doing okay on Patreon and book sales at conventions. So I don't have, but I mean, if Patreon dried up, we'd lose the house. So, this is why I recommend Patreon is one of the best ways that writers can reach an audience. It's for a very small subscription, you're usually getting more than you would get if you subscribe to a magazine every month. Used to be you would pay, like $3 or $4 for a copy of Galaxy or Astounding. And way back when, if you're subscribing to somebody's Patreon page for $3 or $4 a month, you're getting a personal magazine. And if you love reading and if you have a relationship, a partnership with that author, it's a great way to support them. And there are a lot of people, Daniel Keys Moran, Patricia Elrod, Tom Smith, Joe Phillips. A lot of people have Patreon pages. I do. Adam Troy Castro does. What I've been doing is publishing a short story, sometimes a new one, every Friday. Sometimes I'm serializing something. And then I try and do essays, puns, limericks, whatever during the week. So, I'm on Patreon. So there's that. Now, for the move, we have been making progress. We have 2 more rooms to remodel, and then we can list this house. And we wanted to have the house listed in June, but everything is taking longer than we wanted. In terms of the move, it looks like we're going to be able to do it this year. Once we move, we can start looking into preschools for the kids. Elise can go back to work. Sean will be able to reboot his business. So right now, I'm carrying the financial load for everybody, but we're okay for now. But again, buy my books, support my Patreon page. And I'm not alone. There are other writers who are doing the same things. So, and if you follow me on Facebook, from time to time, you'll see me supporting somebody else's GoFundMe or Patreon page or whatever, because it's all about partnership. We have to take care of each other. This goes back to something that I learned in theater arts, where the head of the department called the whole department together and said, "You are all partners. You cannot be competitors. When one of you wins, you all win. Theater wins. When one of you fails, theater fails, and all of you fail. We have to be partners and support each other." And I'm convinced that we in the science fiction genre have to function that way as well. So thank you, Robin. So yeah, I entered the science fiction genre with incredible admiration for Heinlein and Sturgeon and Clarke and Asimov and Delaney and Ellison and McCaffrey and Kate Wilhelm and Santa Henderson and Andre Norton and all these writers who had informed my childhood, my adolescence. And so as I saw other writers coming up and they were doing great work like Spider Robinson and John Varley and Connie Willis and so on, it's like my admiration for what people are inventing in the field, Octavia Butler and so on, it hasn't stopped. And I realized it took me a while to figure it out. We are all partners in this. We are not competitors. We don't benefit by sucking all the oxygen out of the room. We benefit by helping everybody win.
And
so, yeah.
Oh, and David, you're such a gentleman about that. And the fact is that we are all in this together. I'd just like to remind people that I am rereading A Matter for Men myself right now.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, hey, thank you.
Book 5, I only need to write 3 more chapters. And with everything going on here, it's like the plate is so full. It's like by the time I get to my writing time, I'm too exhausted to write. And I know exactly what has to happen in those chapters. So.
What?
But book 5 I want to finish it this year before we go to Vermont.
Well, I'm going to get caught up, and I will look forward to stuff that you're working on for us, but we're going to talk about that another time. Right now, I just want to...
Oh, yes. I do want to point out, I sold you a story. You haven't paid me yet, but I sold a story to Bob Brown, one of Bob Brown's anthologies, and it is, I'll just say it's a pisser and leave it at that.
Well, and...
Yeah, I got you.
Oh God, I have to say, David, that story has it just kind of it keeps flowing, as you would know.
It is a story not to be. I'm not sure what to say about that story. It is probably the most scatological story I've ever written.
Well. I just like to say that it is one of my great pleasures to publish you, and looking forward to the work we're doing. And breaking up is hard to do too, but we'll talk about that another time. But I just wanted to say, David, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for living and existing.
Thank you.
And
thank you very much. And I've been reading the comments running down the side. Thank you so much for all of the nice words in the chat. I've been enjoying reading that. So thank you.
All righty. Bob.